So today I want to go over an absolutely ridiculous Solar Warlock build that I think is the first full support / healing build in Destiny 2. And a full healer build may sound a bit odd for Destiny 2, but this build is legitimately crazy, especially when you get into higher tier content. I've been using it for the Grandmaster Nightfall, and it's a night and day difference in just how consistently you could complete the Grandmaster Nightfall or other high tier content with other random players. Now there's two pretty important parts of this build we have to first go over. First off being our exotic armor piece, which is going to be the Speaker Sight. And the special of this is the Lost Voice. Healing grenades spawn a restorative turret. Healing allies occasionally spawns an orb of power. So you use healing grenade, you throw it, it spawns this healing turret that just pulses AoE healing that applies cure and restoration ×2 to anybody it heals. It also has some range, so it'll throw these healing orbs at players, attract to them, and heal them. And also to spawn these orbs of power, you can use anything that heals, but you do actually have to heal people, so you can't just use healing on somebody at full health. It won't spawn the orbs of power. It also spawns a lot of orbs of power over time. In fact, I was generating more than double the orbs of my teammates while doing completions of the Grandmaster Nightfall. And the other big piece of this build is one of the weapons we're using, which is No Hesitation, which is the first support frame weapon in the game. Now, how this weapon works is you shoot it normally at enemies, you build up its healing meter, it fills up very quickly, and then when you're not ADSing and looking at teammates, they'll have a triangle on them if you can heal them, and you just shoot at them non-ADSing, and it will heal them and apply restoration to them. So it's ridiculously strong, and when you apply that restoration to teammates, it also gives you a weapon damage buff. And this weapon actually deals some pretty decent damage when you have that weapon buff active. And this weapon can be crafted so you could get enhanced rolls. And there's some ridiculous enhanced rolls. Specifically, you're going to want the Physic perk. Now this reads that rapidly healing allies grants you and your allies restoration for an approved duration. Normally, when you're healing allies with this, it just gives them restoration ×1. But with Physic right now, it's bugged and it's been confirmed to be bugged, but it's giving you and your allies ×2 restoration instead of ×1. What this should do when it's fixed is give you and your allies ×1 restoration for increased duration. But it gives 2 right now, so it's absolutely ridiculous. But this weapon is also bugged in another way. So this is a solar weapon. So if you get Radiant, solar weapons should be able to break barrier champion shields. This currently won't do that, kind of. You can still actually deal the damage to the barrier shield and empty the white bar that should normally stun the barrier, but it won't go fully and stun the champion. It just empties that bar. But since this build is fully based around healing your allies, if one other person on your team has an anti-barrier weapon or some other effect, they just need to deal 1 damage to the barrier and it will fully break. So hopefully those bugs are fixed at some point. Also, you can get incandescent on this. That's what I would recommend. So you add a ton of AoE damage and you add a ton of healing for you and your allies. But that brings us to our abilities. For a super, we're going to be using Song of Flame, and Song of Flame actually buffs your allies. So staying in line with this being a full support / healing build. Now Song of Flame just transforms your grenades and your melee into massively improved versions. Your grenade turns into a phoenix that bounces between enemies, scorches and ignites them, and your melee just becomes a massively buffed incinerator snap. But while Song of Flame is active, you and your nearby allies regenerate your abilities more quickly and are more resistant to incoming damage. So your allies are also going to get big buffs while you're in Song of Flame. Then for your class ability, I'm going to be using Healing Rift. You can also just use Empowering Rift. I just want a Healing Rift to go more in line with a lot of additional healing. For melee, going to use Incinerator Snap, just an incredibly strong melee ability. Scorches targets, can ignite them, does quite a lot of damage. You're going to need Healing Grenade. That's obviously going to be used for our exotic armor piece. Then for our aspects, we're using Touch of Flame. This is going to buff our Healing Grenade, which we really don't need, but there's not really other options you need. You could use Icarus Dash if you want to, but I'll just use Touch of Flame for more healing. And then we're using Hellion, which is also really good because we have so much ability regen that we'll have it up 100% of the time. And Hellion just does a lot of damage. It scorches and ignites. So while you're just healing your allies, just stay pointed towards enemies and you're going to be dealing a ton of passive damage as well. Then for our fragments, we have another very important part of the build. Now this reads that applying restoration, cure, or radiant to allies grants increased grenade, melee, and class ability regeneration rate for a short duration. This lasts for 5 seconds, and it gives you absolutely absurd increase to regeneration for all of your abilities. And we can have this up legitimately 100% of the time. You don't actually need to like heal anybody with restoration or anything like that. You just have to apply these effects. And we'll be able to apply these effects infinitely with our healing weapon, our healing turret, and other effects. So we'll be getting our abilities back just absurdly fast at all times. Then we're using Ember of Torches. Powered melee attacks make you and your nearby allies radiant. So we'll be able to give us and our allies radiant almost 100% of the time because we have so much ability regen. Then I'm using Ember of Wonder. Rapidly defeating multiple targets with solar ignitions generates an orb of power, and then your solar ignitions have increased area of effect. Now I'm using these just to make our AoE a bit better, especially when in Song of Flame, and especially with the Nightfall this week, which is the Glassway. This is really good for the end boss fight because you're sitting in that room. All of these champions are coming in one corridor, and you can very easily group them up, do massive ignitions. You can actually change both of these up for pretty much anything else you want, depending on how you like to play. But I like these just for the better ignitions, and just because these give increased stats. 10 to resilience and 10 to strength, always going to be helpful. And that brings us to our artifact mods. First row, you can use whatever you want depending on how you want to counter champions. Second row, we're using overcharged armory because we are going to be using a dealer's choice weapon. And then winning hand, while using weapons with a dealer's choice origin trait, combatant precision final blows or rapidly defeating combatants causes them to explode, dealing solar damage. Having multiple of these weapons equipped increases the effect, and we are going to be using 2 dealer's choice weapons, so we're just going to get more AoE explosions. Then we're going to be using elemental siphon. Rapid final blows with a kinetic weapon or weapon matching your equipped super creates an elemental pickup that matches your equipped super, and we are primarily going to be using no hesitation, which is solar, so we can create fire sprites. Then we're going to be using press the advantage. Breaking a combatant shield grants increased weapon stability, handling, and reload speed. And then threaded blast, destroying a tangle with a strand weapon creates a larger and more damaging explosion. Then counter energy. When you or a member of your fire team stun a champion, you gain energy for your least charge ability. Then radiant orbs. When you pick up an orb of power, become radiant. Don't necessarily need this. This is just to make sure we always have it, and there's not really any other mods that work with this build. Then a prismatic transfer. When you cast your super, each member of your fire team with a super type different than yours gains a bonus to weapon damage. So just some additional weapon damage for you and your team. And then shield crush. While you are amplified to radiant, your grenade recharges faster. That's the only thing we're getting from shield crush. And then for your stats, you're always going to want 100 resilience. Then I'm going into discipline. Then I'm going into strength. Then into recovery. After getting 100 resilience at discipline, you can go into strength or recovery. Doesn't matter which one. I also don't have the best rolled armor pieces for the best stats, but the primary thing you're always going to want is just that resilience. The other stats actually aren't going to matter a ton with this build specifically. Then for our helmet mods, we're going harmonic siphon. So our rapid solar final blows creates an orb of power, no hesitation. It's actually a decent weapon, especially with incandescent. Then I'm currently using heavy ammo finder and heavy ammo scout, so I get more heavy ammo from defeating enemies, and when I get heavy ammo, it gives it to the rest of my team as well. Now I'm primarily using this because we have another way to get special ammo, but if you feel like you're not getting enough special ammo with this and you're using a special weapon, just switch up to special ammo finder and special ammo scout. Then on our gauntlets, we're going to be using heavy-handed. Your power melee final blows create orbs of power. Then focusing strike grants class ability energy when you cause damage with a powered melee attack. And then impact induction, causing damage with a powered melee attack reduces your grenade cooldown. Now you can also switch one of these up for maybe like a solar loader or something like that, because we get our abilities back really quickly without these mods, but you don't really have a ton of other super good options, so you might as well get your abilities back even faster. Then for our chest armor, you're just going to use any damage reductions depending on what content you're doing. So this week we're taking more void damage, so I just have 2 void resistance mods. Then for our leg armor, I'm currently using 1 solar weapon surge. You could use multiple of these, but I'm currently also using absolution to reduce all cooldowns each time we pick up an orb of power, just to make sure we get our abilities back when we need them. And then innervation reduces grenade cooldown each time you pick up an orb of power. I'm also using more of these mods to get our grenade back quicker, just to make sure it gets spread around our healing turrets, especially if you're, say, moving through areas quickly or your teammates are playing more aggressively. I want to be able to have my healing turret up to move them around much much more easily. But you can use multiple solar weapon surges or other elemental weapon surges if you want to as well. Then finally, for our class item, I'm using Reaper. After you use your class ability, your next weapon final blow creates an orb of power. This is very good. Distribution reduces all ability cooldowns when you use your class ability near targets. And then I'm using special finisher. So finishers generate special ammo for the whole fire team at all times. This is the reason I'm using heavy ammo finder on our helmet, because we can just make special ammo by finishing any target. And again, this just plays into being a support and a healer, creating a bunch of ammo for our team while healing them. And that brings us to our weapons, and I'm still just using the call. This weapon is still just so incredibly strong. It's always worth using. Even though the Nightfall this week doesn't have unstoppable champions in it, the call is just still so good. Then we're using No Hesitation as we went over. And then for a heavy, I'm currently using Thunderlord just because this week you need a counter overload, and this has intrinsic overload on it. Very good for that. And this weapon is just pretty decent for this week, being the Glassway. Now, if you're saying doing other content that you want to do better single target damage and you don't need to go against overload, maybe you're doing like onslaught and going up against the boss, you can just use Dragon's Breath. Dragon's Breath is going to be incredibly strong, synergizes with ignitions, so you can combine your Song of Flame and Hellion with Dragon's Breath. You'll get its fuel back super quickly, just do massive amounts of damage that way. But that's the entirety of this Warlock healing build, and this is legitimately the first time in the history of Destiny as a franchise that I've felt there is an actual full healing and support build, and this is it. And it is ridiculously strong. I've done some Grandmaster Nightfalls this week without using this build, just using like a normal damage prismatic build, and this build makes this high-end content significantly easier. All you need to do is get some other players that maybe have some more damage for bosses or some better bursts to take down champions, and this build will keep them alive, buff them up, give them ammo, and just support them in every way possible, making everything so much easier. So I definitely recommend giving this a go. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.